Salutations, fellow Fallout aviators. Today, I wanted to launch this video series skywards on the back of the iconic Vertibirds, which have graced the vast majority of Fallout wastelands. This stalwart dragonfly and sometimes goldfish of a VTOL has evolved greatly with the changes in dimensions and polygons over the years, and it is my great honor to compare and contrast each rendition. In somewhat of a channel first, there is a significant amount known about the XVB, or Experimental Vertical Bombers in US military nomenclature, series of aircraft collectively known as Vertibirds, of which we know there are at least two, the XVB-01 and the XVB-02. It is not explicitly known, however, what model each of the three flavors of Vertibirds we have seen belong to, though it is commonly believed the Fallout 2 rendition is a transport variant of the XVB-02 and the Fallout 3 and New Vegas renditions are the gunship variants. This would leave the Fallout 4 and 76 variants as the original XVB-01s. I'll elucidate on the reasons behind this as we take a look at each of the crafts in question. What we do know for sure, however, is the XVB-01 was designed in order to fulfill the requirements of the Joint Service Vertical Takeoff Landing Experimental JVX contract issued by the Department of Defense. The XVB-01 saw limited deployment in as early as 2072 and showed great promise. In a bid to expand upon the success of the XVB-01, the DoD greenlit the development of the XVB-02, which was designed to be superior to the original model in virtually every aspect. The XVB-02 was targeted to enter full military service in the latter stages of 2085, and had seen limited production run models in active service during the later stages of the Battle of Anchorage in 2077. When the bombs fell, heralding the apocalypse, the 02 model of Vertibird was still in the prototype phase in development, and it would remain in that state for many years while the Enclave worked to perfect its design. Before we start our journey through the evolution of the Vertibird, let's take a look at some of the common features. It is known that the Vertibirds of the Bethesda era are crewed by two, one pilot and one co-pilot, so by the transitive property, we will infer that the Fallout 2 rendition shares this trait. The next and most obvious commonality is the fact they all feature adjustable wings with mounted rotor engine nacelles, an interesting design choice, to be sure. I was surprised to see this approach, given what I imagined to be the obvious downside of having the entire surface area of the wing presenting drag while in the hovering configuration. But it's actually been done in the real world as well. The Ling Temcovat XC-142 featured tilt-wing design like the Vertibird and actually demonstrated its capabilities successfully. But in the 60s, the military and commercial sectors were not interested in such an aircraft. This would change following the failure of Operation Eagle Claw during the Iran hostage crisis of 1980, resulting in the development of the tilt-rotor V-22 Osprey. All this to say, not the horrific design choice I had originally thought, although not the best either, I'd bet.
Speaking of the Osprey, I don't know any canon representations for the speed and max altitude for any of the Vertibirds, so I figure let's take a look at the Osprey to form a basis for those specifications.
The Osprey features rotating nacelles with 3 rotor blades on each rather than rotating wings, and dimensions of 57 feet 4 inches or 17.48 meters, and a wingspan of 45 feet 10 inches or 14 meters, with a max altitude of 25,000 feet or 7,600 meters, and has a publicly acknowledged max speed of 351 miles per hour or 565 kilometers per hour when operating in fixed wing mode. Now that we have a reference to compare each version to, let's take our best swing at breaking down each individual model's specifications, starting in chronological order with the Vertibird's earliest appearance in Fallout 2 with what I will call the Proto-Bird, just because it's the original. Before I do, however, for full disclosure, I must admit I have not played any of the pre-Bethesda era Fallout games, so I am far from an expert on early lore. So please comment below with any corrections or additions you have. I'd love to learn more from y'all. With that out of the way, let's get into it. The Proto-Bird, which takes after the Dragonfly, features a heavily armored fuselage with a glass canopy, 6 fixed wheels that resemble legs, a large cargo bay, and a winch capable of hauling several tons of equipment, 7 blades on top of each rotor to provide extra lift, and seems to be lacking any armament. The XVB-02 series of Vertibirds is known to feature 2 distinct subversions, a transport, CV, or cargo vertical version, and an AVB, attack vertical bomber gunship version. Due to the lack of heavy armaments and the exposed nature of the glass canopy and visual similarities between this model and the Fallout 3 and New Vegas models, it seems likely that the Vertibird is the CV version, so CV02. Although the dimensions of the Vertibird are unknown to me, the dimensions of the Fallout 3 and New Vegas versions are known, so we will use those as an approximation. She has a length of 38 feet, or 11.7 meters, and a wingspan of 35 feet, or 10.8 meters. Interestingly enough, the Vertibird was powered by conventional fuel sources, meaning unlike the other models, it does have a maximum range limitation that would be retconned in later renditions, but it did make sense at the time, at least to me, given the staging area for these crafts was the Enclave oil rig. As such, I will attempt to derive this from the Osprey's max of 1,011 nautical miles. Given that the Vertibird is significantly smaller than the Osprey with a better ratio of wingspan to length in comparison, it would not surprise me if the Vertibird had a longer max range of, let's say, 1,100 nautical miles, or 1,770 kilometers. As for her speed, I'm going to figure that the fixed landing gear would add a significant amount of drag, reducing her max speed to 320 miles per hour, or 515 kilometers per hour. Finally, when it comes to the max altitude for the Vertibird, I'll again increase it a bit due to the gained lift capability from the larger wingspan and call it 27,000 feet or 8,230 meters. Now let's break down some pros and cons I have with this design. The first pro is this model wears its dragonfly inspiration on its sleeve, and I really appreciate that. It looks wild, like a Fallout vehicle kinda should. I also am happy to see a solid connection point for the wings to the fuselage. What I didn't like so much starts with that massive glass canopy. Don't get me wrong, glass makes a lot of sense and is used in aircraft cockpits all the time. Situational awareness is king. The problem is I just don't get the vibe this thing would pass the chicken cannon test. A real thing, I assure you. Its technical name is a flight impact simulator, where chickens are launched at canopies to make sure they can handle a bird strike. It is really important though, don't use a frozen chicken. It's happened before, and it's a waste of a perfectly good canopy, so keep that in mind. Next con is the previously mentioned fixed landing gear. Just not an ideal look for a performance aircraft, you know what I mean? And finally, I get it's a transport variant, but I'd still like to see some sort of main armament. Now we sojourn into the third dimension with the Bethesda-era Fallout 3 and Obsidian Classic New Vegas, with a model that I'd like to call Sparks, mainly because it looks awesome and really brings home that dragonfly aesthetic. I mean, look at those legs. Even though there are just 4, the way they fold is magnificently insectoid in nature. And that tail and that face. Who doesn't love that face? Feel free to rain on my parade in the comments below, but my mind won't be changed. I mean, it's the type of dragonfly I wouldn't mind being modded into the Spiral Reignited trilogy to replace Sparks, and that's real high praise coming from me. I named my dog after that dragon. Just saying. Anyways, the Sparks design is very well fleshed out actually, with even the internal layout of the vehicle being known. She has had the glass canopy of the Vertibird replaced with a heavily armored canopy, with viewing slots on both eyes and running laterally across the width of the head, broken up by what appears to be specialized optics of some description. Sparks has also had her power plant upgraded from conventional to nuclear, as is more in line with the Fallout universe as we have come to know. Good old Sparky has also received gunship upgrades, comprising a modular loadout of weapons and countermeasures, meaning she can be armed to the teeth with the capability of sporting Gatling lasers, auto-loading missile racks, and a bomb bay filled to the brim with mini-nuke love taps, putting the B in AVB, Attack Vertical Bomber 02. Now we once again get into the realm of derived specifications. First, I'll be giving the Sparks rendition a bump in the speed department, ending up at a max speed of 350 miles per hour, or 564 kilometers per hour, as she does not have fixed landing gear. Similarly, due to the increased speed and therefore lift, I'll give her a slight bump in max altitude to 28,000 feet or 8,532 meters. Onward we go to the pros, cons, and interesting things about this design. On the pros side, Sparks has the coolest aesthetic in my opinion, a point I've already made abundantly clear, and has by far the best interior in comparison to the Fallout 4 rendition. There is clearly 4 jump seats and ample standing room, allowing for at least 6 units to be transported comfortably, even with power armor, but likely more. Although, it must be said that this design does not take into account the heavy dose of buff out the modern rendition of power armor has taken. I'm not going to hold that against the design, however, given at the time this wasn't the case. And even then, its interior is still leagues better than the competition. On top of this, she looks to be the most survivable of the three, at least as far as the fuselage goes, with a lot of frontal armor and the distinct lack of a glass canopy. Next, I've got to mention, aircraft actually do generally have riveted joints, due to the nature of the alloys generally used in aircraft being complex to weld in nature. So in this case, rivets are a pro. Now for the negatives. The vision slot, although more armored, also would significantly hinder situational awareness for the pilot. Kinda a big deal that, unless they are hiding an F-35 style helmet somewhere that allows the pilot to see through the fuselage using a complex system of cameras, which I highly doubt. Also, although I like the interior, there are some incongruencies that create cognitive dissonance, such as the portholes on the exterior model and second point of entry that do not appear in the interior cell. Also, the portholes are a con in their own right, as they are out of place on a heavily armored gunship such as this. On another disappointing note, there isn't really any place for a mini nuke bay or for a missile launching system. Last, but not least as far as cons go, the wing and tail design is lacking. Firstly, the dainty connection point between the wing and fuselage looks to be a massive weakness, given the intense forces that will be acting upon it. Secondly, the rotor blades are similarly diminutive and would struggle to create adequate lift, making me wonder if I wasn't too generous to this model in the derived specifications section. And finally, the tail's horizontal stabilizers look to be criminally undersized. There are a few remaining interesting things to be found on this model that I've yet to mention. It's a little odd, but the tail laterals fold up into the vertical. Not sure what purpose this would serve, but I figured I'd point it out nonetheless. Then there are the two bulbous modules on the chin of the aircraft, which could be some sort of radar or sensor pods. Also, on a final interesting note, at least to me, each leg actually has two wheels rather than one, unique among the vertibirds. Last, but certainly not least, we have the odd apple of the group that appears to have a significantly different aesthetic design. Gone is the way of the dragonfly the previous two vertibirds embodied, and in, as the Fallout 4 art guide states, is the result of a goldfish meeting a hind helicopter. Now, the goldfish thing I totally see in the canopy design, but the hind part feels like a bit of a stretch. I mean, number one, that's a Russian helicopter, so kind of a weird place to start. But also, just looking at it, I don't really see anything all that similar. Although I'll give you that the rounded shape and position of the dorsal turbine does create a somewhat similar silhouette, reminiscent of the vertibird design. All that to say, now that I've heard the goldfish part, I can't unsee it, so I'm just going to refer to this model as Goldfish. It's the VTOL that smiles back. The Goldfish is believed to be, by many, the original XVB-01 model of Vertibird, and there's a good deal of evidence that supports this. First of all, as mentioned, the Goldfish looks nothing like the Protobird and Sparks, who share many visual similarities. This strongly suggests that they are not part of the same 02 model. Additionally, there is the fact that this model of Vertibird not only exists in Fallout 76, but also a fully automated version known as the Vertibot exists. If the Goldfish is the 01 model, then the production run could have already begun by the time the bombs fell. But if these are in fact 02 models, then the completion of the prototype phase and the beginning of production would have had to occur in significantly less than 25 years, and work completely automating those same models would have also had to occur in that same limited time frame. Although it is not an impossibility in a universe with fusion power and robots that is moving forward pretty fast for a military program in the best of times, let alone in times of nuclear annihilation. Finally, there is the fact that the research project BR-04 exists in the lore of Fallout 76. The goal of this project was to create a miniaturized Vertibot swarm that would allow for the covert bugging of enemy mainframes and the extracting of data of interest. A goal that wouldn't really make a ton of sense for the Enclave following the Great War, given the lack of enemies with mainframes to worry about. Unsurprisingly, Project Locust was cancelled once the engineers estimated the required technology would require each bot to be about the size of an IF band. That being said though, I do have a nitpick with this theory, namely in the fact the XVB-02 models are supposed to be superior in every way to the 01 models. Looking at the Goldfish, I just don't see how that would be possible in terms of speed or overall functionality, as I will touch on shortly. With that nitpick put aside, however, on a lore and logic level, I'm partial to the idea the Goldfish is actually the original 01 model. Let me know your theories in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Okay, on to the overview of the goldfish. In addition to the resurrection of the large glass canopy from the protobird, the goldfish has a few unique facets. Firstly, to better lend itself towards usage as a parasite fighter launched from the Pridowin, she features folding wings and a tail-mounted docking hook to facilitate this functionality. She also features dual fixed 5mm machine guns on either side of the nose and a 5mm minigun on a floor rail mechanism, allowing it to be used on either side of the vertibird. Finally, her squad bay features sliding doors, a vertibird first, and a single jump seat, lending it to be a rather poor choice as a transport in my opinion, at least in comparison to the Sparks rendition. Drumroll please! For the last time in this video at least, I will take a shot in the dark at deriving the remaining unknown specifications. It is known that the goldfish has a length of 51 feet or 15.4 meters and a wingspan of 43 feet or 13 meters. And her sporting of twin jet engines allow her to produce more airspeed and theoretically more lift than the Osprey. Given that, I'll give her an increased max altitude of 30,000 feet or 9,114 meters. Finally, as you might have guessed, I'm going to give this model a significant edge in max speed of 450 miles per hour or 725 kilometers per hour. Phew! I'm glad that's done. Making up numbers is hard, guys. Now to talk about the pros, cons, and interesting bits and baubles about the goldfish. First, the wings, nacelles, and rotor blades look by far the most functional and realistic of the bunch in both size and detail. The blades are nice and thick, the wings have plenty of surface area and connect to the fuselage solidly. And to add icing to the cake, the wings are foldable, a very nice detail for a parasite aircraft such as this to go along with the tailhook. And also the rivets once again actually check out. Finally, the jet engines are dope, albeit probably unnecessary, but in a crazy universe like Fallout, it just works. That's enough positive talk though. Let's get into the dark side of the goldfish. First, I've got to say, the goldfish aesthetic is nowhere near as appealing as the dragonfly aesthetic. Next, as you could probably guess, that massive glass canopy would not survive the chicken cannon as well. And the fact the aircraft has the actual durability of a goldfish in game gives it a bad impression for what's supposed to be the alpha predator of the wasteland. Then there is the odd nature of the rear tricycle landing gear. The third rearmost wheel just seems completely unnecessary. Lastly, the interior of this vertibird is weak. Yes, the cockpit is fine, but the rest of the interior has little thought given to functionality. As for the interesting section, I only really have one thing to add, and it's really just a question. What's the purpose of the bulbous compartments underneath the crew cabin? Kinda looks like a drop tank, but that doesn't make a lot of sense given the nuclear-powered bit. Okay, now that we have taken an in-depth look at all three evolutions of the vertibird, I'm going to choose what I consider to be my favorite. It's probably no surprise given how much I gushed about the aesthetics of the Sparks variant that that's the one I'm going with if I had to choose. Feel free to let me know in the comments if I made the right choice. If I had my way, however, I'd make an amalgamation of the two. I mean, picture it. Take the fuselage and landing gear from Sparks, remove those portholes, and slap on the wings, nacelles, and tail from the goldfish, and blammo mac and cheese, you have a beautiful specimen, at least in my opinion. Wow. That was a lot, but I'm not quite done yet. In making of this video, I thought of a couple of questions that I think are fairly hard to answer, and I'd like to present them to you. Firstly, I'm going to state the obvious that a vertibird is both a helicopter and a fixed-winged aircraft. Rare is the individual that can fly both in our world. How the heck are the NCR, Brotherhood, and Gunner pilots learning to perform such a feat? Has the Brotherhood discovered some sort of Operation Anchorage training sim facility to develop their pilots? Are the Gunner pilots ex-Enclave or Brotherhood members? The same question must also be asked about how they learn to maintain these complex machines, let alone obtain replacement parts. The next line of questioning I have relates to computing, a dangerous place to go in the Fallout universe, but I'll go there anyways, and ask, is fly-by-wire a possibility? Which for those that don't know, means the vehicle is inherently unstable, resulting in enhanced maneuvering characteristics but requiring complex computing to maintain stable flight, in the limited size characteristics of the vertibird without the transistor. I figure probably not, but then again, somehow, some level of artificial intelligence exists within the frame of an iBot and Protectrons. So, maybe? If it's not though, that would help to explain the lack of particularly exciting fighter aircraft in the Fallout universe. Now for the final line of questioning I'd like to present. Does anyone else think it's odd that the vertibirds land for the troops to dismount in hostile territory? Given the fact that power armor makes the wearer immune to the effects of fall damage, wouldn't it make a lot more sense for the mechanized units to simply jump out of the vertibird and secure the landing zone before the more squishy infantry dismount? Now I understand this is likely a limitation of the game's design, but still. I look forward to hearing your thoughts about these questions and any other questions you might have in the comments. Boy howdy, this video ended up being long, but hopefully a good one. I won't keep you much longer, but I wanted to thank you again for watching and for all of your support. Over 1,750 subscribers as of the time of writing in just 1 month. That's insane. As always, if you like this content and would like to see it do well, please jab that like button with a stim pack and subscribe if you haven't already to see more. Spydingo out.